Hello, welcome back. I'm Abhishek De Silva, an undergraduate of the JAM Institute for Advanced Technology. Welcome back with the project named eShop, and today I'm going to discuss about the program of the message sending and vaping process. Here we discussed the design of this message page in the previous video. Here I have added a select tag to select the relevant user in addition to the design that we discussed in the previous video. And here we can see that the users that register in our eShop has listed here, and we can see the messages that we have received and also the messages that we have sent has listed here. When we click one of these messages, we can see that the messages we sent and the messages we received from that relevant user is listed in the text area. So then let's type a message as hi, and before sending we have to select the relevant receiver as Chandin Pereira, and then let's send the message, and we can see alert is displayed as the message sent, and then press OK, and we can see in the set messages the message that we have sent is displayed here. So then if I move to the other browser with the customer logged in by the name Chandin Pereira, here if I refresh the page, we can see a new message has arrived from the previous user. Here we can see the relevant message is displaying here. If I send a message by selecting the relevant user as I received your message, and if I click on this send button, and we can see that is displayed as the message sent, and then press OK. And if I move to the other browser by the name of this user, here we can see a new message has arrived. Here the new messages, we can see the new messages are in a blue color. So if I click on this message, we can see that the relevant message that we sent earlier is viewing here. So then let's discuss about this process. So then let's move to Visual Studio Code, and here I have obtained the email that's stored in this session by the name and store that in a variable called mail here. And after that, in the selector relevant to selecting the relevant user, I have opened the PHP script, and I have called a search function with the query as select all from the user table, and I have stored the relevant result that we obtained from the database in a variable called select result set, and I have obtained the number of rows in it and store that in a variable called select num. And I have used a for loop here, and I have created a variable called z and assigned the value as 0, and I have checked whether the value of this z variable is less than the select num, and I have used an increment here. And I have obtained the result that's stored in the select results through the fetch, so can store the relevant results in a variable called selected data. And I have checked whether if the email of the selected data, or if the email that's stored in the selected data is not equal to the mail that we have stored in the variable called mail, then inside the option tag as the value we have echoed the email that's stored in the selected data, and then as the name we have echoed the first name and the last name that's stored in the selected data. And here again I have used the PHP script, and I have called a search function with the query as select distinct all from the chat table where 2 is equal to mail, and order I'm telling to order by the date time in descending order, and I have stored the relevant results we get back from the database in a variable called message result set, and I have obtained the number of rows in it and stored that in a variable called message num. And then for the tab related to the received part, I have used the PHP script again, and I have used the for loop, and I have created a variable called x and assigned the value as 0, and then I have checked whether the value of this x is less than the message num, and I have used an increment here. And then I have obtained the result stored in this message result set through the fetch, so can store that in a variable called message data. And after that I have obtained the from that stored in this message data and store that in a variable called send. And then I have again called a search function with the query as select all from the user table where email equals to the sender, and I have stored the relevant results we get back from the database in a variable called user result set, and then I have again called the search function with the query as select all from the profile image table where the user email is equal to the sender, and then I have stored the relevant results we get back from the database in a variable called image result set, and then I have obtained the result that's stored in this user result set through the fetch as I can store that in a variable called user data. Similarly, I have obtained the result that's stored in this image result set through the fetch as I can store that in a variable called image data. And through if condition, we have checked whether the status that's stored in the message data is 0. It means the user or the relevant user has not read the message. So here we have used the background color as primary, and here we have used an onClick function with the function called view message, and I have sent a parameter as the sender, that's the value that's stored in the variable called sender. If I move to JavaScript file to discuss about the view message function, here we can see in the view message function I have obtained the parameters in from the messages.php file, and then I have created a new XML HTTP request and stored that in a variable called request here. And then I have called an anonymous function on each change in state of this request, and I have checked whether the status is equal to 200 and null so the ready state is equal to 4, and if so I have obtained the response text of this request and stored that in a variable called response here. And after that I have obtained the element with the ID chat box, and I have in HTML the response that we get back from the server side. And then here we use the open function, and I have used the get method to send the information to the server side, and I have sent the information to view message process.php file, and then I have binded the email by the name e to the URL as we use the get method. Here I have used the true to mention that I am using the ajax method, and then I have sent the request to the view message process.php file. So then let's move to view message process.php file. Here in the view message process.php file, at first I have used a PHP script, and then I have used a session start, and I have included the connection.php file, and then I have obtained the email that's stored in the session called u and stored in a variable called receiver email, and then I have obtained the email that comes through the get method and so that in a variable called sender email here. And after that I have called a search function with the query as select all from the chat table where from equals to the sender email or to equals to the sender email, and I have stored the relevant results we get back from the database in a variable called message result set here, and I have obtained the number of rows in it and store that in a variable called message num. And after that I have used the for loop here by creating a variable as x and checking whether the value of x is less than the message num and using an increment here. And then I have obtained the result that's stored in the message result set through the fetch assoc and store that in a variable called message data. And by using the if condition I have checked whether the from that's stored in the message data is equal to the sender email, and the to mail that's stored in the message data is equal to the receiver email, and if so we have called search function again with the query as select all from the user table, and we have used an inner join here to join the profile image table on the user table dot email equals to profile image table dot the user email, where email equals to the from email that's stored in the message data. And then I have obtained the result that's stored in the user results through the fetch assoc and stored that in a variable called user data. And then I have echoed an HTML code to the client side. Here too I have used the PHP script, and inside the if condition I have checked whether the path that's stored in the user data is set. If so, we have echoed the path that's stored in the user data as the src of the image tag, and if it comes to the else condition that means the path is not set. So then we have used a default image as the src of this image tag, and here we have echoed the content that's stored in the message data and also we have echoed the date time that's stored in the message data, and also the from email that's stored in the message data. If the from email of the message data is not equal to send the email and the to email of the message data not equal to receive email, we comes to the next else if of that if condition, where it checks whether the to email that's stored in the message data is equal to send the email and the from email that's stored in the message data is equal to receive email, and if so it is the receiving part. So we have echoed the content that's stored in the message data and also the date time that's stored in the message data. After that we have checked whether the status of the message data is equal to 0, and if so we have used an IOD function here with the query as update the chat table, and we have set the values as status column equals to 1, where chat ID equals to chat ID that's stored in the message data. So then let's again move to messages.php file. Here the same code that relevant to the sender part. Here we have checked whether the path of the image data is set. If so, we have obtained the relevant path that's stored in the image data and echoed that as the src of this image tag, and if so, and if not, if there's not any path stored, we have used an default image as the src of this image, and then we have echoed the first name and last name of the relevant user that's stored in the user data, and we have echoed the data that's stored in the message data, and also we have echoed the content that's stored in the message data as the message. And after that, if it comes to the else of this if condition, where it checks whether the status is equal to 0, if it comes to the else of that, in the else part there too we have called the on click function as view message, and here too it's the same code that we discussed earlier. And in the div related to the message box, we have used the PHP script again, and we have called a search function with the query as select the distinct all from chat table, where from email is equal to the mail. We are telling to order by the date time in descending order, and we have obtained the number of rows in it and stored that in a variable called message num2, and we have used the for loop here by creating a variable called y and assigning the value as 0 and checking whether the value of y is less than the message num2 and using an increment here. And then we have obtained the result that's stored in the message result 2 through the fetch as token, store that in a variable called message data2, and after that we have obtained the to mail that's stored in the message data2 and store that in a variable called receiver. And after that we have called the search function again with another query as select all from the user table, and joining the profile image table on the user table dot email equals to profile image table dot user email, where email equals to the receiver. And after that we have obtained the result that's stored in the user result 2 through the fetch as I can store that in a variable called user data2. And after that here too I have used the view message function on the click of this relevant div, but in addition I have changed the parameter here as the receiver. We have used the sender as the parameter before, and here we use the receiver as the parameter. So here's the same code relevant to that. Here we have checked whether a path that's stored in the user image data2 is set. If so, we have echoed the relevant path stored in this user data2 as the src of this image tag, and if not, we have used a default path here. And here I have used the me text here, that means the messages sent by the current user, and here I have echoed the date time that's stored in the message data2 as the date time, and also the content that's stored in the message data2. And for the button relevant to the input tag with the placeholder type a message where we type the messages, I have used an on click with the function called send message. If I move to JavaScript file to discuss about this send message function, we can see that we have created a variable called receiver mail and store the value as 0 here, and we have obtained the element with the ID select user and store that in a variable called R2 here. If I showed you the element with the ID select user, it's in the selecting part that we use to select the relevant receiver. Here we can see for the select tag I have given the select user ID, and again in the function send message we check whether the R2 is equal to 0. If so, we have obtained the element with the ID R male, and we have stored that in a variable called R1 here. And then I have assigned the inner HTML of this R1 as the value of this receiver male, and then if it comes to the else of this if condition where it checks whether the R2 is equal to 0, there we store the value of this R2 as the value of the receiver male. And then after that I have obtained the element with the ID message text and stored that in a variable called message text. And after that I have created a new form data and so that in a variable called form here, and I have appended the receiver mail with the name RM and appended that to the form, and also the value of the message text with the name empty and appended them to the form that we have created. And here we have created a new XML HTTP request and so that in a variable called request here. And after that I have called an anonymous function on each change in the state of this request, and through an if condition I have checked whether the status of this is equal to 200 and the ready state of this is equal to 4, and if so we have obtained the response text of this request and so that in a variable called response here. And through an if condition we have checked whether the response is equal to success. If so, we have alert message as the message sent, and we have reloaded the page. And if it comes to the else of this if condition where it checks whether the response is equal to success, there we alert the response we get back from the server side. And through this open function we have used the post method to send the information to the server side, and we have sent the information to send message process.php file, and I have used true here to mention that I'm using the Ajax method. And then I have sent the request with the form that we have created. So then let's move to send message process.php file. Here at first I have used the PHP script, and I have used a session start, and I have included the connection.php file. And then I have obtained the email that's stored in the session by the name u and stored that in a variable called sender. And also I have obtained the value that comes by the name rm through the post method and stored that in a variable called receiver here. Similarly, the message that we obtained from the client side is stored in a variable called message. And after that I have created a new date time and stored that in a variable called d here. And also I have created a new date time zone with the time zone as Asia Colombo and stored that in a variable called time zone. And I have set the time zone t is set to the date that we have created, and then I have formatted the relevant date according to the format year, month, date, hours, minutes and seconds, and store the in a variable called date here. And after that I have called the IOD function with the queries insert into the chat table, and here I have mentioned the relevant columns as the content, date, time, status, from and to column, and I have set the values as the message data as message date, and 0 I have set a default value for the status as 0, and then the sender and then the receiver. And after that I have echoed a message as success, and this is the process of the message sending part. And let's meet to the next video, and bye for today.